we often take for granted, our waste. For many of us, waste feels like the end of the story, but the moment an item leaves our hands and disappears into the system. But what if that moment is actually the beginning of something new? What if waste isn't a problem to manage, but a resource to redesign, recover, and regenerate? Today's conversation brings together design, business, innovation, and policy. 3 lenses that we must work in sync if we're serious about accelerating the circular economy. Now, you may realise that those lenses don't always naturally align, and design ambition, business realities, policy constraints can pull in different directions. But finding that balance is exactly where the circular economy becomes so incredibly powerful. It challenges us to innovate, collaborate, and build systems that reduce environmental impact while unlocking economic resilience. So now don't forget to use the Slido on the screen. And before we hear from our panellists, I'm going to bring the perspectives of those who will inherit the consequences of our decisions. So the question we ask this time is, why should we consider waste as a resource?
Waste should be seen as a resource because so much of what we throw away still holds value. Instead of letting it go to waste, we can repurpose it to benefit communities and the environment. For example, a program that collects old or spoiled organic waste could transport it to a local community farm or garden to be used as compost, turning waste into something that nourishes new growth.
Waste as a resource, I think waste is one of the biggest untapped resources we have. If we change how we look at it, it can become the start of something new instead of the end of a process. For example, food scraps can turn into compost that nourishes local gardens, or leftover materials can be repurposed into something creative and useful. It's about shifting from a throwaway mentality and mindset to one that values circularity, where everything has a purpose and nothing really goes to waste.
Waste should be considered a resource because we're taking so much away from the environment and we're not putting it in. An example I can think of is we consume so much food and we throw out so much food, and I think it's not sustainable. You know, something I love about Brisbane is how clean the air is, how green it is, and for us to maintain that, you know, people need to have worm farms and being able to put all their food scraps in, you know, water their garden with the worm juice, and kind of going into that, you know, cycle where what you eat isn't just going in the bin, it isn't just ending up in landfill if you don't eat it. It's going back in.
Waste as a resource, to me, is about reframing the way that we think about things as waste. I think to us, waste is typically a liability. It's something that we need to get rid of, and it's something to get disposed. But as we find better ways to utilize our byproducts from our regular activities and minimize our waste, we'll be able to repurpose and engineer things for the betterment of not just society, but our environment as well. And to me, I think it's really important that we find ways to make this, pursuit of reducing waste not feel like a chore, but something that really people feel empowered and understand how they can contribute in the best possible way that suits their lifestyle.
If waste was considered a resource, we would be less wasteful with it. Nowadays, we live in a single-use society where the convenience and cost of discarding something are more attractive than recycling, reusing, or buying items that last longer. If everything we used was considered a resource before it became waste, it would prevent it from being discarded in the first place. We need again to have items that are built to last rather than built to be replaced. Meantime, our landfills have built up beyond proportion and they could use definitely some resource mining.
So I'm now going to invite to the stage our fantastic moderator for the waste session, John Bradbury is the board member of Circular Economy Club. He has over a decade of experience in manufacturing and engineering. His proven track record of leading improvements for sites that enhance operations for companies, customers, and employees. Throughout his career, John has been a problem solver using root cause analysis to define, understand, and solve challenges faced while navigating the complexities of working in extremely complex environments. He has successfully led projects from ideation to implementation, saving sites over £3 million by developing standard practices, implementing KPIs, and commissioning of new lines. And John also sits on the board of the Circularity Club Gold Coast, and so he is very well positioned to ask the tough questions of this panel. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. And no one ever wants to hear their bio, so now on to 3 more bios. No, I'm joking. Thank you for having me here today. It's fantastic, and thank you all for taking your Tuesday arvo out to come and listen to this panel. And thank you to the sponsors as well, Mott McDonald, Impact Dragonfly, and the great people here at People for Nature. Apologies. I was thinking purple shirts. So the panel we've got today is going to be quite fun. We've got some fantastic panelists who can give us quite a broad perspective on the particular topic. So I'm going to introduce them, and then they're going to come up and give us their initial thoughts, and then we'll get into some Q&A. So I might start with Louise Tran. Louise is a change maker in food and sustainability, leading Oz Harvesters ventures to design bold, innovative and circular business models that drive positive impact on food systems. And we'll get to see some of it later on if you want. As a member of Oz Harvest leadership team, she spent more than 15 years shaping social enterprises, building purpose-driven business models. In 2022, she also co-founded Viet Harvest, based on the Oz Harvest model, which has already served over 200,000 meals across 3 cities in Vietnam, saving thousands of kilograms of food from ending up in landfill. As the founding chair of the Multicultural Leadership Initiative, she champions culturally diverse leadership in climate movement. As strategist, storyteller, culture builder, Louise believes business at its best blends profit, purpose to create lasting change for people and planet. So thank you, Louise. Next we have Ria. Ria has a really cool job title, which is Buildings Physics Engineer, which is probably the most impressive and inspiring one I've had so far. So I was like, wow, it's pretty cool. So Ria began her career in low energy building design and operation, which sparked an interest in her assessing emissions across the whole life cycle. She's a member of the Materials and Embodied Carbon Leadership Alliance, MECLA, if anyone knows who they are, working group which aim to improve Australia's status on embodied carbon calculations, along with participating in the Green Building of Council of Australia's expert resource panel for circular strategies. And that's going to come in very handy by 2032 with the ambitions we have. Ria strongly believes in the focus of the end-of-life stage and the importance to extend the lifespan of materials, products and buildings at their highest possible value. She understands trade-offs that often are required to achieve truly sustainable design from emissions feasibility perspective. Her current work includes assessing, quantifying and recording the circularity of the Treasury building here in Brisbane. So we're all excited to know what's going to be happening at the Treasury, Ria.
I mean, it is very exciting, and I'll try and share as much as I can.
Thank you. So please welcome Ria. And last but not least is Aaron. Aaron is the founder and director of Project Net Zero, a social enterprise committed to driving sustainable procurement and carbon reductions across Australia. With extensive experience in sustainability, strategy, corporate social responsibility, and First Nations business engagement, Aaron works with governments, education, corporate partners to create measurable environmental social impact. Through Project Net Zero, he has led initiatives that integrate local supply chains, support Indigenous-owned enterprises, and help organisations achieve their sustainability net zero goals. Aaron's approach blends practical implementation with systems thinking, ensuring that every project delivers on the lasting community and environmental benefit. His work aims closely with the principles of the UN Sustainability Goals, promoting responsible consumption, climate action, and inclusive economic growth. Thank you, Aaron. So I might hand over to each of you. Please feel, jump in first, whoever wants the thing. So what does this sort of topic mean to you? So designing waste out, and what does designing disposability mean for you? What from your perspectives?
Shall I head in first? I think when you think of waste, you think of something that you want to dispose of. You think of something that has no use anymore. And in this day and age, there are so many materials, objects, products out there that we can be reusing a lot further. There's also so many more facilities and services out there to ensure that we can repair products and refurbish products. And I work in the building space specifically, so we're looking at design of buildings mainly and precincts as well, so the wider environment around it. And when you think of the amount of energy, operational energy and embodied energy that goes into creating these buildings and precincts, there are so many things that you need to measure. There are so many components, there are so many designers involved, there are so many stakeholders involved. And coordinating between all of these communities, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And the amount of waste that comes out of that, whether that's waste that is physical or waste that is energy as well, there are so many components that you need to be finding a solution for, you need to be putting a plan in for. But if you get to that point and there's no plan for what the waste is, what do? You panic. And we're human, we all panic at the end of the day. So what we find most effective in our designs is when we get in at reference design stage very early on and we create a plan. And there are so many plans out there. There's the net zero hierarchy, there's the 9R pillars, which go from reuse, reduce, your 3 Rs, they've now expanded to 9. But there's so many strategies out there. And if you put that forward and you inform the project manager, you inform the design team, it creates awareness. And creating awareness means that you can help find solutions from all perspectives and something feasible and sustainable moving forwards.
Sounds like quite a very complex system with lots of moving parts, which, Aaron, would you like to chip in there?
Hi, there we are. Yeah, so absolutely agree. So Project Net Zero, so what we kind of wanted to build was so my background's in procurement, so I've sat in those positions around what that would need to look like. And Project Net Zero's model is to become that conduit in the middle and offer a full rounded value proposition on how you can add value at that point to divert items from landfill. So essentially what we do is we remove all FFE from buildings. So from corporate buildings, from hotels, we offer the clients the opportunity to divert those that are considered waste and we're heading towards landfill. The opportunity from a commercial point of view for us to come in and add value by removing all of those items and then assessing each item on where it sits in its life cycle and look to repurpose, donate to community organisations, keep in circularity. So that model and that BAU function is happening every day across the business, and we wanted to be able to add a commercial solution, not just saying, it's great to say that there's the idea is to keep these items in circularity and donate to people. There's plenty of people that need them, but at the end of the day, the businesses are commercial and need to make decisions based on, we're on really strict time constraints and we've got to defit this floor by this time, and that's why they wrap it up into and consider it as a waste stream. But we've tried to come to the market with a value proposition being that, we can come in and tap into that space commercially, saving you money, diverting the items from landfill, keeping to your schedules, and then with the added benefit of having environmental and social impact. So we're virtually trying to make it a no-brainer for the business. Well, if we can do it on time and under budget with the added benefit of keeping items in circularity, why would the industry not do it? So,
That's wonderful. And for those who don't understand FFE, it's...
Oh, sorry. So it's all furniture, fixtures and fittings. So if you look at just any floor, the easiest way to explain, if you tip a building upside down and shake it, everything that would fall out that's not connected. So absolutely everything. To the cutlery, the cups, the plates, everything that sits inside a building if you were to tip it up. All of that currently is just considered a waste stream for disposal at end of life. Like they we'll talk about it more, but they touch on like repurposing bits and pieces, but the rest of it just goes, and there's an opportunity until we get to a point of manufacturing products with recyclable components. There's that, let's just put 10 years on it, there's a 10-year gap between now and then that there's millions of kilograms going to landfill that can be repurposed.
That's great, thank you very much. And talking about millions of kilograms, Louise, would you like to come in with Oz Harvest?
I love the different perspectives that we offer. It's usually I'm on just the food panel. So as you heard, I represent Oz Harvest and Oz Harvest Ventures, and to the point about how many kilos, it's 7.6 million kilograms of food that is wasted just in Australia each year. And the cost of that is about $36 billion. So to me, waste as a resource, like that $36 billion, can you imagine what we could do if we didn't waste that food? And so I think for me, what this topic means and what it represents for me is a very long time working in this space and still talking about the same issue, still talking about the same challenges, that 30 to 40% of food that is grown here in Australia ends up as waste. And so how do we embed, how do we change, how do we find the solutions? And that's why I am excited that, there are solutions out there and more solutions are required. And we'll talk about barriers and the funding barriers and the opportunities to commercialise some of these innovative ideas. But there are solutions, but I think the $36 billion worth of food that goes to waste, while 3.4 million Australian households are going hungry, is something that doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense in a country like Australia, a country like Vietnam. It's not just the food, it's the water, it's the energy, it's the labour, it's all of the embedded costs that go into producing that kilogram of food, ending up in landfill, and then in landfill, the environmental impact that has. The methane is much more challenging for our environment, and this is why I think having food waste reduction, food systems change, food sustainability as a key topic when we talk about climate solutions is really critical, and more of these conversations need to be had, which is why I'm very pleased to be here today.
Exactly, and we're excited to have you here. And for those who don't know, later on, some of what Louise has been working on will be actually out there for you to try. That sort of repurposing some of those materials. So I wish I had one here as a prop. I was planning to do that, but I didn't get there. Sorry. Not trying to plug, by the way. Just excited. So waste isn't only about resources, as Louise just said. It's also about greenhouse gases, which is admitted as, even from what we just heard about transporting and disposing of the material, not only in the creation of them, where we're overconsumption. The actions we take to reduce waste is key. We can eliminate, reduce, and recycle through different key pillars of the circular economy. So some of those key pillars are things like, as Sarah sort of said in the introductions, around procurement as one. So that's, for me, one of the core pillars of the circular economy, because it is the thing that drives a lot of the change that we sort of see. So how do we get procurement right? We're seeing some great examples across the world with Paris, the Paris Olympics, some of the policies they had. Around 90% of that material, of the items that they produced to be able to create the Olympics, had to be repurposed, have a second life. They were things like furniture, sports flooring. So from that to spend, what procurement strategies do we need to design out disposability from your lens? And where have you seen it working? So I might hand over to Aaron first.
Great question, actually. So for us, I see a couple of huge opportunities. Like obviously our key focus is on the floor before it gets fitted out. So like we have a lot of interest in like what you're taking out before you're designing the new floor. So we're partnering with a lot of corporates now that are supporting the, and I don't know how many people in the room understand the tender processes and how a demolition component is put together. So when you, I'll just quickly, when you design a floor, like, and you'll be able to talk to this, like you break down how it's put out to tender. Someone can tender on those chairs supplying, on the, like the pillows there, on every piece. But when it comes out the back end, it's all wrapped into, we want this floor moved out. So it's very hard for anyone that wants to repurpose those chairs and make that as an offering to put that forward, because you've got to do the whole scope or you don't get an opportunity to do something with those chairs. So we've been pushing for the industry to shift to like carving that piece out, and we've got a couple of really big leaders like Westpac Group, for instance. So they've carved out all of that FFE, so all that furniture. So we support them nationally. So we do all of their furniture repurposing right down to the cutlery, the cups, the toilet paper rolls, like their stationery cupboards, like absolutely that everything that's left in a branch when they're doing it. Like that's it. Like they're market leaders in that space for that. Like that's incredible. Qantas is another one we're supporting. So I think like that's probably for me, like that's a key piece on the exit. And then the what we're seeing on the design piece is like if the products aren't yet to a level of where each or the components are able to be broken down and repurposed and reused, we're seeing like stewardship programs implemented early, like on what's going to happen at the back end, and getting that talked about at the start. And obviously doing the design with a circularity perspective, like we're seeing other partners commit to a 20% reuse program of the floor, so and some even higher, which means they're leaning into us from other DFITs saying, well, you know, we'd love to commit to all the chairs being reused or repurposed from another side or another one of our DFITs from another corporate partner, and they're pushing to see that implemented so that not everything's brand new. So,
have you found it challenging trying to get those organisations to start pulling that in, and what sort of strategies have you managed to use to get them to start changing those processes?
Working like backwards and trying to solve the problem that they're going to tell you, which is like most of the time is like, can it be commercial? Will it hold up or delay the process? Can you support having them, like if we just use a chair, like a Herman Miller really nice chair, like can you have them regassed and like repurposed so that we can implement it back in? So taking away any of the barriers or challenges that might arise. And I guess our business having the background in procurement and sitting on that side, we've been able to alleviate some of those barriers and challenges and have those discussions really early to say, you know, we can offer that. And even the storage, most organisations go, so, okay, well, if we're exiting this floor and then we're designing a new one or we're moving across town, who's going to hold our furniture for us during that period to re-put back in there if you want us to reuse? So we've, you know, implemented and partnered with organisations to help us like store items to go back in. So just again, alleviating any of the barriers to make it easier and more simple to implement.
That's wonderful. And I guess I might hand over to Ria, because she's going to be the one who's going to be making sure so it's easier to disassemble and reuse in the future. So Ria, would you like to add anything into that procurement space?
So what I wanted to speak about there is the Treasury. So obviously that's super local down in the city, and Griffith University will be having their business campus, I believe, there, which will be opening in 2027, which is super exciting. And a massive piece there is obviously the circularity aspect. It's a heritage building and it's listed, which means you can't actually do a lot to it, which is great from an energy perspective and carbon emissions because it keeps emissions as low as possible. However, when they stepped in and occupied the building, it came as it was. It was filthy carpets, full of smoke, full of alcohol. There were chairs left everywhere. The kitchens were full of, like the fridges were full. There were pots and pans and everything. So they had so many components within this building, which they were like, what do we do with them? Like, where do they go? But also, we don't want to send it to landfill. We were super lucky with this project that the project manager was very keen on circularity, and his main goal was reducing as much as possible that's going to go to landfill. So with Griffith University, obviously they have several campuses around Brisbane, and they use that to their advantage. So all of the products and components and materials within the Treasury as a casino, where it was deemed feasible. Obviously, not everything could be reused, and that's also perfectly fine as well. Sometimes you do have to result in waste because sometimes safety comes first as well. But honestly, about over 85% of the products that were found within the vicinity have been reused. They've been put on a platform site, they've been sold off to other students, they've been moved to other campuses. And the great thing here that we've noticed is that they've been quantifying it as well. They've kept a record of everything that they're doing, they're measuring it, they're showing it as a story. And that's something that, as consultants, especially when we get involved in early stages of design of work, we push that. We push them to measure, we push them to report, because if we're not reporting, we can't understand the data and we can't create change either. And when you're doing building design, it's quite difficult to make sure that every single stakeholder is committing to counting and recording and sharing that data as well. As sustainability consultants, we step in and we push that as much as possible, but I'm not going to lie, not a lot of the time people listen to us. It's quite difficult without policy and compliance to push people to actually create these changes that need to be made. So when we do get an opportunity like the project of the Treasury, where they've already stepped in and reused as much as they can, they're looking at those giant oak tables within the vicinity and they're like, what can we do with this? How can we reuse this material, but as locally as possible as well? It's so great to see, and the outcome out of it is that they're holding on to their identity, they're holding on to that heritage, they're keeping things truly in Brisbane as much as possible, but also they're reducing emissions. They're reducing emissions like crazy. We compared it to if they were to build a new education building, and it's around 69% less in embodied carbon emissions by just holding on to this original structure that they're going for. They've got 3 structural arrangements that they're actually going in and changing, which again, insane. They're reusing as many of the fittings as possible to create a new purpose for them. So where they had loads of CCTV before, because obviously it was operating as a casino, they're now replacing that with some of the mechanical equipment that they need to make sure that an education facility is serving its purpose. So super excited to see things from that perspective, but obviously that's not every single project. We don't always get that lucky. And when it comes to procurement, you're going in, you're creating those plans, you're creating those strategies, but following it all the way through with every stakeholder that's involved, so difficult. It's one of the biggest challenges we face every single day. We want to create change, we want to create purpose, we want to show that including a new sustainable material may be a little bit of a challenge from a cost perspective, but its purpose and its specification is still going to perform the same ways. We have developed so much in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of our materials, in terms of our resources. We need to be using those. There are amazing companies out there that are producing super innovative materials and super innovative methods. And if we don't allow our clients to actually grasp onto them whilst they can and implement them, these changes aren't going to be happening. So I think we mentioned earlier, humans are afraid of change. Yes. Yes, we are. And it comes to all forms of our lives as well. And especially in the design industry, you see that every single day.
That's wonderful. The one question that comes from that in my mind is stuck all the way through is, did the carpet get reused?
Sorry?
Did the carpet get reused?
Oh, no. They did look into it. They were like, oh, should we create some framework out of it, or literally just put it in a frame to be like, oh, this is the original heritage carpet. But as soon as they started ripping it out, But they did reveal some really cool elements of the floor from the original building. So as you go through, we actually have some really cool plans which highlight which are the actual heritage elements, which will be shown a little bit more now that it's being reused. And I think there will be areas that visitors can go in and see it a little bit more as well. So super exciting.
That's very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing it and going have a bit of a nosy.
Yeah, for sure.
And seeing what it's like.
Yeah.
Louise, you're obviously in a very interesting spot in the supply chain where you're trying to catalyse different partners to come together. What does that procurement sort of lens mean for you?
So I think at every different step of the food supply chain, there's levels of wastage, whether it's direct from farm all the way through to each of your fridges at home. And I think what we love to do is blame people, point the finger, it's them, not me. But actually, if I told you that 50% of that food waste comes from your fridge, every time that you're throwing away that leftover meal that you didn't feel like eating that night for the third time, or the lettuce that went a bit soggy in the bag, like 50% of that $36 billion that I mentioned comes from each and every one of us. Back to procurement, I think my point is that at every single step we all have a responsibility. Whether it's the retailer, making sure that good quality food doesn't go to waste and helps to feed people, which is what AusHarvest has been doing for the past 20 plus years, has just recently delivered about 300 million meals here in Australia, and that's the work of the core charity. All the way through to thinking about how do we look at policy levers, how do we look at advocacy and legislative change to encourage people to waste less food from a business level, also from the consumer level. So I think through the 20 years of AusHarvest, even the first legal change that Ronnie Khan, who founded AusHarvest, actioned was to change the Civil Liabilities Amendment Act that enabled food businesses to donate that food without that fear of liability. So 20 years ago, that legislation was changed in every single state, which enabled the bakeries of the world, the supermarket giants, the food shop, the hotels, the restaurants, they were able to then provide that food, donate that food to feed humans without the fear of liability. So that's one example. And I think if we fast forward to today, there are things that AusHarvest and AusHarvest Ventures is championing to enable less food to go to waste. And we're working with farmers, we're working directly with the people who are growing food, and for whatever reason, the 30% that is left on farm, what can we do to help bring value back to that so it's not ending up as waste? You'll get to try our wonderful products. It's using upcycled fruits, upcycled produce that don't look perfect on the outside. They might be, the lemonade that we're serving here today is green instead of yellow, so you might not see that on your shelves when you're shopping, but it's a perfectly good lemon, for example. So I think there are creative ways that AusHarvest Ventures is now looking at how do we repurpose that, how do we bring value back to food, and how do we actually connect the value of food back to the consumer, because often we're so far removed, we're living in the cities, we want a convenient way of shopping. Talk about change, how do we change our own behaviour to shop better, to shop for good, to support the local producers, to support the local manufacturers and the local industry. So I think procurement touches on all of those levels in the food supply chain. There wasn't one single thing I could focus on, but it impacts all of us, and we each have a responsibility.
No, that's great. I might hold you there because you just mentioned something very important, which is policy. If you had a magic wand, is there any sort of policy change you'd want to happen within the food space to be able to recover all of that food, all that billions of tons of food that we've got sitting there?
There's a couple of key policy areas that we are advocating and championing, which is incentives for food donations from farmers. So if there are tax incentives that enable farmers to donate food to charities like AusHarvest or Food Bank or others, that would help to reduce food waste, but it also will help to feed more people. So that's one simple but key area of a policy lever that can help. The other is labelling. So I think we've been really obsessed with best before dates and use by dates that, if you ask your grandparents or your great-grandparents whether they had use by dates on that milk that the milkman brought over or however milk was supplied back then, you wouldn't have those labels. So I think the excessive labelling and where health concerns are, that should be kept. However, we are looking at how do we update the labelling laws, the labelling legislations around food, so that could contribute really positively to reducing less food waste.
That's wonderful. Sorry, I disappeared there for a second. But no, I think personally, so much labelling on stuff at the moment, it would be great to simplify, make it easier for people to understand, and obviously balancing that health risk as well. But really love the idea of the tax incentives. That could be fantastic. How much material do you think we would save?
I'd have to come back to you on that.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Significant. Look,
Yeah.
if we're wasting 7.6 million tonnes of food each year, even if you have a fraction of that, even if that's 1% or 10%, I'm not a maths person, so somebody figure that out. But even if it's a fraction, it's significant.
What about you, Ria? Policy-wise, what's your magic wand? What policy would you change to make things better?
One thing that definitely aligns with everything we're saying here is prolonging that use stage as much as possible. Whether it's a food item and it doesn't need to actually be used by its best before date because it does have a few more days to it, or whether it's a chair. You know, you are prolonging that use element to it as much as possible. You are upcycling it, you're reusing it, you're redecorating it, you're reusing an entire building, whether it be that. There's that middle stage, which when we look at it as engineers, I need a strategy of everything, I need some sort of workflow, and we follow the whole life cycle, and that is your stage B, it's your use stage. How do we prolong that as much as possible and get the maximum use out of the product or material at its highest value as well? So that's what we're all looking at, and I think that's where it comes into the policy. We need to be looking at that from day one. It doesn't need to be when you're at 80% design stage and the builders are already in and they know what they're doing. It needs to be from day one. You need to understand how are we prolonging that use stage for as much as possible and reducing emissions. And I'm not just talking carbon emissions either. I'm talking all greenhouse gases, which again, you've touched upon. So we're seeing this whole correlation between all our industries. We're looking at all of the greenhouse gases out there and we're prolonging that use stage as much as possible.
It's very similar to what you're doing at the Treasury, prolonging that use, keeping the structure there, but just updating it and giving it a bit of a makeover.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to see.
No, it's really exciting, and I think that's something that's done internationally. I'm from the UK, and I only moved over last year, and obviously there's a lot more limited land there that you can actually build on. And coming over here, one of my first projects was North Shore Hamilton, and it was the design of an entire precinct because you have all this land to build on. And I was just like, what, you mean they're starting from scratch? You know, like, this is crazy because I'm so used to like going into a building, seeing outdated systems, seeing like older structures and everything like that, and coming here and seeing that fresh eye to it all. I was like, this is amazing, but at the end of the day, we're working in sustainability. We want to be using as much as possible, but from the get-go. But it's also exciting because there is less compliance here. There's less need to actually follow a procedure to ensure emissions are kept to a minimum, which allows more flexibility for creativity, which is where I think you get all these smaller, amazing companies who are reaching out and doing incredible things because they are challenging the norm, and the industry here is allowing you to challenge the norm as well.
That's great. Have you got an example of one of those little companies that since coming over you've been, wow, they're doing some amazing work?
This isn't a little company at all, but recently I attended a webinar for Wholesome, which are a concrete manufacturer, and they are doing some really cool work on creating a concrete type structure, I would say, that are actually able to charge electric vehicles. So they're trialing that. This is obviously not a small company and very different to anything else, but I think that's something we mainly work on as well. When we're looking at reducing emissions, we start with the highest impact. Your highest impact is usually your concrete. You're usually looking straight towards that. And if you can provide something that serves a multi-purpose, you're immediately reducing emissions of some sort. You're also like encouraging people to use EVs, and it's just a complex way to find a solution to a problem that you didn't realize you had. But yeah, super exciting.
That's really cool. So when you drive along the concrete, it charges your car?
Yep, so they're testing it in the US at the moment, but then they'll be pitching it towards more so car parks as well, so more like stationary charging as opposed to on the go.
That's fantastic. And hopefully with the lithium side of it, it's nice and fire safe, being an engineer.
Well, we hope so, but with it being trialled in the US and different standards internationally, obviously it takes a little bit more to come over. But yeah, work in progress, but it's always exciting to see that innovative things are happening, but they also need to be adapted to the space that we're working in as well. So Australia is obviously a very different environment all over the country, and that needs to be considered when you are bringing things across. So it's not as easy as, this works here, let's take it here. There's like a lot more risk assessments that need to go in.
Yeah, definitely. But that's really, really exciting. It would be cool to have a car park full of charging as you go. Engineer by trade, so I get really excited about toys. What about you, Aaron? What sort of like policy magic wand sort of like change would you like to enact?
I guess for us, and I just want to say first, like we actually don't know each other, but I can attest to the incredible work you've done at Treasury. We were actually engaged by the uni to come and support on like circular economy options for them to use. So they're doing a great job over there, and I was lucky enough to have a walk through and get to go out the back of the old casino. So it was pretty cool. But around the policy, I think the right policies are there. What we need to do is double down on that. And to your point about the circularity piece, so there's some incredible policy around now reporting your disposal and your diversion from landfill. But what that needs to double down on is like most companies are committing to the 80, 90% or whatever that looks like. But what we need to double down into the data around that is yes, they're not sending all the furniture to landfill, they've broken it down and recycled it, but not having a look at the fact that maybe 80% of that furniture could have been repurposed and reused and kept in circularity. So corporates and organisations are meeting their targets, but when you double down into the data, I think the next level now around policy is to unpack that and say, well, of that, is there an opportunity to not just send it to recycling, because that's the easy option, and still meet your targets? Is like, if not, why not? Was there an opportunity to support circularity and reuse? So
Definitely. So things like reuse, repair sort of targets.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Instead of just diversion from landfill, which is easy to report on.
Especially with our big energy from waste facilities coming at some point soon to Queensland.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Cool. That's great. All right. So I think I've only got 10 minutes. So I think we're having a great time chatting, but I need to be careful. I'll get in trouble, especially Sarah's going to come for me. So I might move on to, I guess, the bit that I got really, really excited about is probably like innovations that are sort of happening in the spaces. We've got, the panel has got a great sort of range of different innovative approaches, from tasty new drinks to finding solutions to logistical challenges of reuse and getting the mix of the right materials into buildings and still making them look pretty cool. What is one key innovation in the circular economy that's inspired you? So open it up. Anyone can answer.
Do you want me to jump in first? It's a little bit different to the building space, but this is really cool. So we're seeing a lot of support in the hotel space at the minute. So I won't name the hotel, but we're currently supporting this week one of the 5-star hotels here in Brisbane on a defit and repurposing of all their mattresses and like pillows and pillow covers and all the bits and pieces from the kitchenettes out and donated to like crisis housing and reuse programs. Now, like I just think that's, again, there's good news stories in little hits and misses, but it's so good to see the manufacturers and hotel chains get on board with the impact that can have. And then we do a lot in the reporting around that as well, on like the impact that has on those community organisations and the funding that they receive, that they now don't have to spend on those people to buy them brand new mattresses. So it's like the flow on impact of that is incredible, and can't wait for that reporting to come out. But it's I think that for us, it's like the FFE part, in the furniture part from corporates, is really, really good. But to see the other side of the industry now get on board and support like that direct impact for those less fortunate who don't have access to basic things like a clean mattress and a bed to sleep on is incredible.
I'll continue on that theme, because I think what you describe is almost like social enterprises being built to solve problems and provide support to people, so people and planet. And one organisation that I'm really inspired by, I mean, I could talk about food waste for hours, but I'm going to divert to technology waste. And the Reconnect project, run by some incredible founders, Annette and Louise, they repurpose technology, phones, computers, laptops, iPads, tablets, from large companies who don't have a use for that old model and need to upgrade every couple of years. Not only do they repurpose the technology and equipment, but they also train up people who face barriers for employment, and they train, they provide employment opportunities, they provide skills. And so I think that beautiful blend of business for purpose, business for impact. So the Reconnect project really is an inspiring example of reducing that technology waste and also providing that support to people who are locked out of work.
That's wonderful.
I think when I work day to day and produce all these plans and look at circularity plans on a regional level and stuff, I think I struggle definitely with actually bringing it to purpose and bringing it to light on an everyday basis. Like, what are people actually doing? When along the timeline of this project plan are things actually going to be implemented? And seeing it come to light sometimes takes a lot longer than expected. Treasury is obviously an exception, but majority of projects I work on, you create these embodied carbon action plans, you create these circularity plans, you look at all the elements of the materials and the products that are going in and try and provide a solution for the outcome of them. But like recently, I was just scrolling on LinkedIn and I saw there was a school in the Philippines where they've reused their local surfboards as desks within the school. And it's just like a very local, innovative strategy that they've implemented. I doubt they've had a sustainability consultant involved. I doubt they've got any engineers involved, but they've just taken something local and reused it and extended that lifespan of the surfboard to serve a new purpose. And I think it's just like stripping it all back at the end of the day. Less is more. Less is 100% more, and we need to be remembering that. Another little thing that I used to notice walking around London is on a building site, they used to use the builders' hats as little pot plants along the sides, just to give it a bit more of a green characteristic. If you're walking around London, you're not seeing much greenery anyway, are you? So it's just like these little reuse items. I think PPE hats are meant to be resized every 3 years or something like that. I can't remember the exact statistics. Not a contractor, nor do I ever go on site. But the fact that they would otherwise go to waste, they are just pieces of plastic. So you know what? They hung them out, filled it with a bit of soil and put a plant in there. And it's those little bits that actually create change all around and give you those little bits of inspiration that you kind of need every day to be pushing your sustainability lifestyle.
That's wonderful. I think in particular, I'm probably inspired in a very similar way with like little people doing little things that impact their community. I'm lucky enough to work for a local council, and we've got island communities. And we've got this one little island community called Karagara, and they've got a little community compost garden. They look after, they have minimal waste. They've got a little reuse thing at the start. It's a community that you sort of think that people should do, and it really enacts a positive change, and then it starts to cascade because people are like, oh, I'll take my food waste here. Oh, this is growing my garden, my food that I can have, and it's a very circular system. So thank you very much, and thank you, you guys. But we're going to hand over to some questions in the audience. So I think we've got one just at the back there. Sorry for all the stairs you have to climb.
Hi, my name's Pete. Look, I think this is a really interesting topic, and the surfboard example I think is a really interesting one, because this can be a real bottom-up process just about everyday behaviours. Yeah. Like, we might need policies and what, but I think we've either got a cultural issue or a needs issue that can be totally turned around. Like, this is about just doing things simply, slowing down and just using what we need. Like, it's... I think it's a bit of a no-brainer, but I think a bit of a first world problem if I can throw that thing in, but I just don't think we're taking this issue seriously, yet we could all do so much just ourselves.
No, I would agree there. Any thoughts from the panel?
Like you said, the surfboard one it's super interesting. And I think when you said about culture there, culture is the biggest driver when it comes to sustainability. All of us in the room are interested in the same thing and are willing to change that culture. But when you're put on a project of various stakeholders, not every single person is willing to change that culture. And I was saying this to my colleague earlier, when you do come across that person who is willing to change the norm, even if sustainability isn't their main realm, they are willing to put things forward and they're willing to provide budget for you to challenge the norm. And those people are the ones that are creating change throughout the entire industry. I worked on a defence project for about 5 years in the UK, and I was really lucky that the project manager was very interested in actually creating a low body carbon design, which it still is very rare in the UK and in Australia for defence type buildings. And we were looking at the benchmarks and we were realising that they're not actually feasible at all. But this project manager gave me confidence, and especially I was only a couple years out of being a grad at this point, and he was just like, no, you do what you need to do, I will provide the budget. And it actually led to performing a business case with the Ministry of Defence in the UK to ensure that the benchmarks being produced were feasible and that solutions were provided from the get-go to ensure that defence buildings were creating a change that they actually can implement to their projects, as opposed to here's a number, achieve the number, if you don't, oh sorry. So it's about creating that culture change and having the right people in the room to create that change altogether, whether it is on a everyday looking at a chair kind of project or looking at a massive defence site anywhere in the world. 100% agree. And less is more for sure.
Hi, my name is Bernardo. I just got just a thought that I would love to hear your thoughts on. Depreciation schedules, especially we were talking about FFEs. Most of the time it's cheaper and simpler to dispose of FFEs, for example, in an office building, because they are already depreciated. There's no incentives there. We know that there's no reset for depreciation if something gets repurposed. We know furniture, for example, 10 years that furniture is there, it might be perfectly fine, but it's got no value. Computers, technology, 2 years, that's gone. So is there, especially in light of the new climate disclosures, that companies are now having to disclose how they're managing climate-related risks, including emissions, especially in light of that, we know that government's really bad to talk to each other and make sure that policies align. Is there any consideration that you guys know from the ATO to review depreciation schedules to allow or facilitate circularity, especially in that FFE space?
Great question. I don't know from an ATO perspective, but I know what we're trying to offer is, so to answer that first part of the question, so I don't know about the incentives, but essentially what we're trying to do is say, well, if you're going to spend the same amount of money as it's valued at zero at that point, and it's easier to dispose of, if that's going to cost you $1 an item, we'll just use $1, it's easy. It's the same, you can spend the same dollar to send it to us, even though it's depreciated, to keep it in circularity and consider all the reuse opportunities. So we're kind of saying that it doesn't need to go there, it's not going to cost any more. There's no value to your company or business now, but there's value in it being kept in circularity. So I don't know around the incentives, but I know what we're trying to do to minimise the risk for the corporate and reduce the barriers again is like we sign over right and responsibility of that product from the company, so to remove any onus or risk on their perspective. So then we take ownership of that item in its current shape and form, and then we pass it on from there. And so keeping it in circularity. So it's not costing the business anymore. If anything, it's saving them money because they're not paying the disposal fees.
But it is a very tricky problem to try and solve around depreciation. I don't think there's any silver bullet at the moment. Hopefully someone in Europe maybe comes up with some good solutions. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Nandita, and for me, my question is around how a lot of cultures around the world that have circularity embedded in their practices, their everyday life. So have you had any instances where you've taken inspiration or any lessons? I think especially in terms of food waste, at least in my house, I see a lot of circularity in the dishes that are prepared using different parts of a plant or an animal. So is there anything like that that you've kind of taken inspiration from in your practices, in your fields?
Absolutely. I'm of Vietnamese ancestry, so similar to using up everything, you know, that is embedded in our culture, using animal from end to end, using the whole of the vegetables, using and getting the most flavour out of everything. So I think for us in the food space, we absolutely take inspiration from all cultures, especially also our First Nations ancestors, and the way that we protect the land, the way that we, you know, our mission and purpose at OzHarvest is to nourish our country, and that's just the continuation of what we're responsible, what we need to do. You know, we can't grow food if there's no healthy soil. We can't continue to feed the population if our planet is not healthy. So I think there is so much culture and acknowledgement of culture that we, in terms of our values, pride ourselves on as an organisation at OzHarvest, at OzHarvest Ventures, whether it's supporting farmers and ensuring that the food that they're producing is used up, all the way through to when we're feeding people, providing the culturally appropriate meals for our communities. All of that is embedded with culture and something that we're really, really proud of.
No, go for it.
Another great question. So I'll answer that and then a bit of your comment from previously. So I don't know if you can tell my surname. I have a Polish father and a First Nations mother. So both cultures are very much embedded around like that total use and repurposing of absolutely everything. So, and I think given our connection to Mother Earth here and the avoidance of anything going to landfill, I think it's the lens that we use on our company nationwide is like to try to find a repurpose or a reuse for it. And I think that's what our team very much is like works backwards. We have a bigger community team than we do our like removals team, meaning so their job is to connect and find and hold the relationships with community organisations and like repurposing organisations to avoid that item going to landfill under any circumstances. So and to your point around like that, like we do things with like from men's sheds who cut down desks and redo the tops and put legs on them and keep them in communities to the IT stuff. We work with some incredible other social enterprises that keep IT equipment and phones and computers in circularity. Like we just another one's the cutlery and stuff with the hotels and Qantas. They're incredible partners that, and you don't think of this until it's explained to you, but we collect all of that cutlery and we create like welcome packs for homelessness, like community centres that are where someone's transitioning from homelessness into, say, crisis housing and then into their first house. They get to take the furniture and the cutlery packs into their new home. Like we don't think about that. Like who knows where all that cutlery and stuff goes? You know, who would think that there's an opportunity to reuse and repurpose that? But that's the value that we wanted to create is like we're the connector. We wanted to build a company that is the connector between the industry and all of those products and each of because that's the hardest part, I think, is matching it up. Like, where do those items go? Who has time when we've only got one day when it's coming out of that building to find a home for it? So that's the value we try to bring is like there is an opportunity to repurpose everything.
This is just to give an example. Hi, I'm Kim Lu. I work in the health sector, and I'm also with Permaculture Sydney West. And we've worked kind of with Auburn Hospital, where all the hard plastic waste from operating theatre, all the instrument trays and things that don't get contaminated, goes to our permaculture group. So they make great seedling trays and for gardens. So the nurses who organised it actually won a sustainability award for Auburn Hospital. So it's sort of community, and it's sort of like working with the community in the hospital with groups, community groups, is so important.
That's wonderful. It's very, very important, and plastic waste in particular in hospitals is really... Oh, we've got another question.
I'll just keep it very quick. I'm also originally Italian, so I went to New York for the first time living, and I saw like 12 packaged eggs, you know, like huge quantities. In Italy we have 4. But just to give an example, right? And so my question is really around quantity. You are doing already a great job, you know, at repurposing everything that kind of comes down, but we find ourselves like kind of at the bottom and saying, okay, how do we do all this quantity? Because, my question is really around, have you done any work around how much, like telling the top how much is enough? You know, this is enough. Quantity of food coming down, or furniture. You know, have you been doing any reporting saying, oh, enough is enough? You know, like this is the amount that we need. We don't need any more production. You know, type of reporting around that.
I might respond to that quickly. So we're currently doing another project based in Antarctica, which is incredible opportunity as well. So obviously, you have super local projects and super unique projects as well at Mount Macdonald. And for that project, obviously, you're very limited in when you can build, the season you can build, how much you can actually take across via transport, and how much emissions are coming out of that transport from the diesel that's used to carry everything across. And with that, you do have a capacity. How much is actually on that shipping container? At what point is it going to arrive on site? Where are you limited due to the climate within the vicinity of the site? When do you need to get the occupants onto site? And when are they actually safely able to be there? And with that, you have a point of enough is enough, because there's only a certain point that you can push because of everything else, all the external factors that are impacting the design. Obviously, that is a very unique situation, and if you are in a more commercial town where there's accessibility to various more resources and services, you can push as much as you can. But for that one specific project, you do have a breaking point, and there has to be a very clear balance between what's sustainable from just an emissions perspective versus the project's perspective as well.
I want to answer your question, because I think oftentimes we think of waste and these climate challenges as so overwhelming. And if I turn back the question around and say, well, as individuals, let's start with ourselves and ask what is enough. So from a consumption perspective, from a food perspective, look at what's in your fridge. The next time you do reach to buy the extra kilo or the extra lettuce because it's on sale, or when you're looking at your online Instagram feed and you're getting served the ads to buy this because there's Black Friday sales, you know, let's start with ourselves about asking what is enough. Because I think, yes, we can have the policy change, we can have, we need all of the levels of change, but I think as consumers that we live in this constant state of convenience, consumption. Like, let's start with going back to the simplicity of the gentleman above's question. Let's go back to the simple thing of, do I really need that extra pair of jeans? Do I really need that extra shirt? Can I wear this shirt for an extra 20 years? And do I need that extra piece of food that might end up in the bin? And if it's not the bin, what's the other solution? Can I compost it? Can I put it back into the soil? Can I put it back into the earth? Because yes, we will start to see the rollout of FOGO, food and organics recycling and waste management systems. They will catch up. But as consumers, we need to start shopping and buying the ugly thing that goes to waste normally, or changing our own behaviour. So I think I'm just flipping the question back, is we can ask what's enough from that top level, but we can start with ourselves as well.
No, thank you. Aaron, any final comments before I thank you all?
I mean, I could talk all day about it, but I think it's exactly that. It's just it's stopping and thinking, whether you're buying a piece of food or whether you're sitting in a procurement position or you sit on a sustainability team and can influence a decision that it maybe isn't right now, whether it, like if it's food, if it is, but if it's something that's down, you just putting your hand up to add some value can have some incredible impact, whether it's now or later. So I think if there's anything to leave, it's just to think about the flow on of those small little decisions, the impact that'll have.
No, thank you. And thanks, everyone, and thank you for the wonderful questions. If you'd please raise your applause for my lovely panellists here. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah because she's hovering in the background for the last 5 minutes, and she'll get me because we're probably missing out break time.
In the room as you come in, you will notice that there's been a beautiful tree. And our People for Nature volunteers have put together this tree, and it's called a pledge tree. And there are lots of these little insects and animals that are there, and we would love for you to write a little pledge on this and hang it on the tree, because we're going to be putting all this together. It will go into our impact report at the end. And I wanted to do this after the waste session because I think there's some really easy pledges that we can make going forward, starting with, do we really need that? Maybe mentality. But thanks again for joining us. We'll see you back here for 4 o'clock. Enjoy the afternoon tea. Have a chat with people. I'm sure the panelists are staying around for a little bit longer. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.